Okay, you might as well introduce us, Judith.
Okay, well, hi everyone. Uh, Welcome to a session where we're going to be looking at the Iliad, which is the first and, in many senses, the greatest of the Western epic poems. I mean, it's kind of a bit surprising we haven't already done this, but better late than never, I think. So, what's so wonderful about the Iliad, apart from being the first? Well, it's a poem. It's a very long poem. It's an epic. It's in, is it 24 books? Sam will correct me if I'm wrong. And it's in dactylic hexameters, which is a line of poetry. And you can read prose translations, and they're better than nothing. But the reason I wanted to read this Robert Fagle's translation is because he translates it into English verse, and he doesn't actually replicate a Greek dactylic hexameter because that's next to impossible in English. We have different rhythms in verse, but it's recognizably verse, and you kind of notice this if you then go back to a prose translation. That's one thing. The other thing that's so wonderful about the Iliad, for mine, is that it's unparalleled in its depiction of human nature. And part of that, of course, it is in its depiction of the gods, who are protagonists. They're actually active players in the Trojan War. So by the time the action of the poem starts, the war's been going on for nearly 10 years. It started when the Trojan prince, Paris, who is one of the many sons of the Trojan king Priam, when Paris had been promised by the goddess Aphrodite that he would get to be with Helen, the wife of King Menelaus of Sparta. And he went to Sparta and he ran away with Helen. Now, in doing that, Paris was breaking the rules of civilized behavior, because you don't go and stay with someone and then abduct their wife. And particularly in this heroic society where things like that where these protocols were very, very choreographed and were very well understood. So in Paris's view, he was kind of enacting what had been granted him by the goddess, but in everybody else's view, pretty much, he had broken all the rules. Having said that, Paris's family, the royal family of Troy, supported him. And on the other side, Menelaus gathered all the kings of Greece on all the different city-states, because they had all sworn that should it be required, they would all come to support Menelaus and his brother, the leading king, Agamemnon. So that's in the background. And so the Greeks have been sitting in front of the city of Troy for, as I say, nearly 10 years by now. They were pretty fed up with it, basically. That's also in the subtext. And at this juncture, a quarrel breaks out between the greatest of the soldiers in the Greek army, Achilles, and the great king, Agamemnon. And this is where we start. The very first word of the Iliad is Menin, which means rage. Rage, goddess, sing the rage of Peleus' son Achilles, murderous, doomed, that cost the Achaeans, that's the Greeks, countless losses, hurling down to the house of death so many sturdy souls, great fighters' souls, but made their bodies carrion, feasts for the dogs and birds. And the will of Zeus was moving towards its end. Begin, muse, where the two first broke and clashed, Agamemnon, lord of men, and brilliant Achilles. What god drove them to fight with such a fury? Apollo, the son of Zeus and Leto. Incensed at the king, he swept a fatal plague through the army. Men were dying, and all because Agamemnon spurned Apollo's priest. Yes, Chryses approached the Achaeans' fast ships to win his daughter back, bringing a priceless ransom, and bearing high in hand, wound on a golden staff, the wreath of the god, the distant deadly archer. He begged the whole Achaean army, but most of all, the two supreme commanders, Atreus's two sons, Agamemnon, Menelaus, all Argives geared for war. May the gods who hold the halls of Olympus give you Priam's city to plunder, then safe passage home. Just set my daughter free, my dear one, here. Accept these gifts, this ransom. Honor the god who strikes from worlds away, the son of Zeus Apollo. So the priest's daughter had been captured by the Greeks as a war prisoner and was being held essentially as a sex slave by Agamemnon. And reading this again, this passage, you know, I've read this so many times, but this time it occurred to me that this is going to be a theme throughout the Iliad. This is a parent who is appealing on behalf of their child. The priest of Apollo, Chryses, has essentially he's abased himself in front of the great Greek kings just to beg for his child back. And that's a theme that we're going to see again and again. A parent appealing on behalf of a child. It'll happen later when Achilles' divine mother, she's a goddess, Thetis, she goes to Zeus to appeal for Achilles. And it will happen at the end. And I hope we get to that when Priam appeals to Achilles himself for Hector. So then we're told, and all the ranks of the Achaeans cried out their assent. All the Greek soldiers are happy to hand back Chryseis to her father. Respect the priest, accept the shining ransom. But it brought no joy to the heart of Agamemnon. The king dismissed the priest with a brutal order, ringing in his ears. Never again, old man, let me catch sight of you by the hollow ships. Not loitering now, not slinking back tomorrow. The staff and the wreaths of God will never save you then. The girl, I won't give up the girl. Long before that, old age will overtake her in my house in Argos, far from her fatherland, slaving back and forth at the loom, forced to share my bed. Now go, don't tempt my wrath, and you may depart alive. So we already get a sense of what Agamemnon's like. You don't cross him. he is very aware of his role as the leader of men. That's his kind of catchphrase. The old man was terrified. He obeyed the order, turning, trailing away in silence down the shore, where the battle lines of breakers crash and drag. And moving off to a safe distance, over and over, the old priest prayed to the son of sleek-haired Leto, Lord Apollo. Hear me, Apollo, god of the silver bow, who strides the walls of Chris and Scylla sacrosanct, lord in power of Tenedos, Smintheos, god of the plague. If I ever roofed a shrine to please your heart, ever burned the long rich bones of bulls and goats on your holy altar, now bring my prayer to pass. Pay the Danaans back, your arrows for my tears. His prayer went up, and Phoebus Apollo heard him. Down he strode from Olympus' peak, storming at heart, with his bow and hooded quiver slung across his shoulders. The arrows clanged at his back as the god quaked with rage, the god himself on the march, and down he came like night. Over against the ships he dropped a knee, let fly a shaft, and a terrifying clash rang out from the great silver bow. First he went for the mules and circling dogs, but then, launching a piercing shaft at the men themselves, he cut them down in droves, and the corpse fires burnt on night and day, no end in sight. So that was the first passage I wanted to read because it kind of sets the scene. We get the idea of Agamemnon. He doesn't, he's not going to let anyone cross him. But here he has insulted the god. He has offended the priest of Apollo, and this shows us the kind of transactional nature of much ancient Greek religion. The priest at this crisis says to the god, says to Apollo, look, I've made all these sacrifices to you. Now it's time for you to pay me back. And it works. Apollo strides down from Olympus. It's such a beautiful passage, showing him clanking with his quiver on his back, coming down the mountain. And the thing about Apollo is he's the god of the sun. He's Phoebus Apollo, but he's also got this very dark side. He's also the god of disease. He sends plagues. He's bivalent. He is the god of healing, but he's the god of disease. He's the god of the sun, but he has also got a dark side. He's the god of music and the arts, but he is also the god of kind of indiscriminate slaughter when it's the time. And so the metaphor is that his arrows, first of all, interestingly, attacks the mules and the dogs. So this disease that hits the Greek army is some kind of virus, presumably that it jumps species barriers, because first of all, it affects the animals and then it affects the men. And so obviously in an army which is encamped around between the beach and the city of Troy, a disease that's going to pass very quickly and it's going to absolutely wreak havoc, and that's what happens. And so that's where we are. So yeah, that was the first passage I want to talk about. Sorry?
Just quickly on the sun god thing. It's interesting that in say Egyptian mythology, there were different gods for different phases of the sun or different moods of the sun, I guess. So the blistering deadly sun, for example, was like the Sekhmet, I think, the lion-headed female goddess, and she was bloodthirsty and would slay men, even though she was an aspect of the sun. Whereas the more positive aspects of the sun were worshipped as benevolent deities like Ra and Khepra and so on. So it's interesting, isn't it, how um, there's this earthly symbol, but it can have different modes or whatever.
Yeah, 100%. Sam, can't hear you. Yeah, we can't hear you, Sam. Not sure what's going on there. Did someone else want to comment while Sam's sorting out his audio?
Well,
Joe?
he's muted. Does he understand that he's muted? Sam, you're muted. Oh, okay.
Yeah, did anyone else want to comment?
But I must admit, this really grabs your attention, doesn't it? It's very appealing to the imagination. Obviously, Fagin's a brilliant writer.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
enjoying your telling.
Oh, good. The thing too is this kind of starting kind of in the middle of the action, or in fact, as it is towards the end of this long war, it actually had a name in ancient literature, and the Romans called it in medias res, meaning in the middle of things, And it's a great way to start an action story, is right where you're in the middle of things. And you can tell too, sorry, just another thing I just wanted to draw attention to, the rest of the army were quite happy for the priest to be given back his daughter, right? They just wanted things to move along a bit. And it was Agamemnon, who comes across as quite arrogant, who he doesn't want to give up any of his privileges, but the rest of the Greek army was, they were more conscious perhaps of the fact of what was involved by disrespecting Apollo. But yeah, Agamemnon thought he was he disregarded that. You with us, Sam?
How about that? Can you hear me this time?
Yay!
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Oh, no, thank you, Judith, for two things. One, it's now seeing that Apollo Phoebus, I understand now of him being also the god of plague. Why then, in the story of Odysseus, that he has perfect cattle on an island that Odysseus cannot take, So he has the form of what cattle should be, not diminished. And then that idea of disease being an arrow of Apollo makes so much sense. I really appreciate the in the middle of the action because, like you just mentioned at the beginning, this begging for the love and connection of your children and praying as and asking for. I understand now, maybe perhaps why, the Iliad doesn't tell the story of Troy, it tells the story. Sorry, the Iliad doesn't tell the story of the war for Troy, not necessarily the 9 years, and it doesn't tell the ending of the war either. But now what rift opens up at the very beginning and what is appropriate for it to end.
Yeah, that's a great observation, Sam. Yeah. I mean, it's always the case, isn't it, with great literature? Every time you read it, something new occurs to you. So that was just something
Uh,
that struck me this
something
time.
that occurred to me this week as well as I was reading is this curse of Apollo's priest is much like Polyphemus's curse of Odysseus,
Yes.
but it's told in the opposite order. Like Apo- this priest here he's very careful in how he's offered his services and his works. And he's very discreet. He's like, well, for every shingle, for every burnt offering, sort of for every year. Where the Cyclops in Odysseus' tale is like, I've never talked to you, Poseidon. I didn't believe you care about me or I matter. But if I'm ever spawn of you, now curse Odysseus. But both
Yeah.
open this rift.
Well, because Polyphemus is kind of the uncivilized child, isn't he? He's not part of the system, whereas the priest of
Ah,
Apollo is definitely part of the system. He knows
he is the
he knows the
system. He's the
right way to
embodiment of,
approach these things.
yes, yes, yes. But and then it's the opposite, and then it's inside the system and outside the system. That's the opposite thread of both tales
Yes,
as well.
yes, good observation.
And I guess the point is you guys are making that in the Greek world, you have to be careful who you offend because they might be a son of a god or working directly for the god or something like that.
Yeah,
And
exactly. And that's partly why it was such an offense when Paris broke the rules of civilized um, host and guest relationships when he abducted the wife of the king of Sparta.
and wasn't there a,
He created that rift in civil society, but
yeah,
his justification was the goddess Aphrodite, sorry, had given him that privilege.
and I'm pretty rough around the edges with all this stuff, but wasn't there some sort of caution around the way that one should treat strangers and this idea of hospitality because it could be like a god in disguise, for example, and you wouldn't want to risk upsetting them. That was kind of one of the reasons you ought to treat people well.
Yeah, exactly. There's a wonderful myth with that very theme. So, this old couple, Philemon and Baucis, and they're just going about their daily, and these two sort of tatty looking people turn up. And Philemon and Baucis, they just greet them and they offer them a meal and a hospitality. And, in the end of the story, you can kind of work it out. It's actually Zeus and Hermes in disguise. But the disguise was so that they were testing out, who were the people who would be good hosts and follow the rules around kindness to guests. So yes, 100%. So what happens next? And we kind of, we can't do the whole story here. And that's why I've chosen some sections. What happens next is obviously there's something terribly wrong when the whole army comes down with this disease. What's going to happen? Ultimately, Agamemnon's solution is, okay, if I have to give back the priest's daughter, then I'm going to take Achilles' sex slave. That's another girl called Briseis. And Achilles says, no, that's not how it works. She was my booty from the war. You don't get to just take somebody else's girlfriend like that. And so that was the original quarrel between Achilles and Agamemnon. And that's why Achilles went into such a rage. He was on the point of actually physically assaulting Agamemnon until Athena pulls him back by the hair and prevents him from doing that. So Achilles is someone we learn who has no control over his emotions, particularly not over his anger. And it's going to lead to problems. In the end, what happens is Achilles just throws in the towel. He leaves the battlefield. He goes back to his tent. He says, I'm not fighting for Agamemnon. I'm not doing this anymore until I get my proper treatment, my proper honor by Agamemnon. And so that leaves the Greek army in a real quandary. Now, part of the genius of the poem and of Homer, whoever Homer really was, is that he leaves one plot and then he moves over to another plot. And the next section that I wanted to look at was the plot in which we meet Hector, we meet the great Trojan prince. So I'll see if I can get to that.
Just quickly, it kind of feels like a Marvel movie, doesn't it? Because in real life, you'd be like, oh, well, Achilles having a sook, let's get on with it. But in fact, he's like really important to have because he's a killing machine. He's like having Wolverine on your team or something, right?
He is,
Uh,
but there are also plenty of other heroes like Ajax, like Diomedes. Menelaus is a great fighter as well. And so we get, one of the wonderful things about this poem is we get to meet all these amazing characters, and all the Greek heroes have their own personalities. Um,
I have the theory that you could really redress this story and all of these personalities and their impetus and motive, and you could summon the same story as a bunch of football players being brought to a capital city into a football carnival. And they're having a rough time on the bus, and you have the best fullback versus the captain, and who what should lead, and a breakdown, and then a home game, where where the home team are very honorable, or at least some of them, and and then but it doesn't go so well.
And then Odysseus's story is like he gets on Emirates airline to get home, and they get detoured, and he ends up in a different country, and he's stuck in the airport for like way too long.
okay, well, that's a bit of a trivialization of my wonderful epic here. But anyway, let's move on. So the next section I want to look at was let me go, let me find it. It's in book 6. Okay, yeah, I found it. So Hector is one of the sons of King Priam, the greatest of the Trojan fighters. And he actually is a greater person than all of the Greeks. He's a more noble warrior than Achilles, than Agamemnon, Menelaus, Ajax, Diomedes, any of them. But somehow he's kind of doomed. And we get that sense very explicitly in this passage. But it takes obviously quite a while for all that to kind of play out. This might be an opportune moment to say, if you ever get the opportunity, do go and see Troy. Do go to Turkey and do go to the site of what in the 1870s was originally first excavated by the German businessman archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann. Essentially, he found Troy, and this was an amazing thing that he did, because it's hard for us to even kind of appreciate the extent to which all of this was thought to be completely fictional. The discoveries of Schliemann, both at Troy and also on the Greek mainland at Mycenae and Tiryns, I think, showed that there was actually some history behind Homer's epics. And yeah, it's just wonderful to go to Troy and see, oh yeah, that's the Scaean Gate. That's where the fighting may have taken place. So what you can see where I'm looking at now. It's in book 6. Hector has had an argument with his brother, Prince Paris, because Paris is one of those people who is just difficult. But anyway, Paris and Hector have had an argument, and 2/3 down the page, it says, at that, Hector spun and rushed from his house, back by the same way down the wide, well-paved streets, throughout the city until he reached the Scaean Gates, the last point he would pass to gain the field of battle. There his warm, generous wife came running up to meet him, Andromache, the daughter of gallant-hearted Aetion, who had lived below Mount Placos, rich with timber, in Thebe below the peaks, and ruled Cilicia's people. His daughter had married Hector, helmed in bronze. She joined him now, and following in her steps, a servant holding the boy against her breast, in the first flush of life, only a baby, Hector's son, the darling of his eyes, and radiant as a star. Hector would always call the boy Scamandrius. Townsmen called him Astyanax, lord of the city. Nerd word point, Astyanax is 2 ancient Greek terms, Astu, which is the city, and Anax, which is the very ancient Greek word for a king. The later one was Basileus, but so it means the king of the city, lord of the city. Since Hector was the lone defense of Troy, the great man of war, breaking into a broad smile, his gaze fixed on his son in silence. Andromache, pressing close beside him and weeping freely now, clung to his hand, urged him, called him, reckless one, my Hector, your own fiery courage will destroy you. Have you no pity for him, our helpless son, or me and the destiny that weighs me down, your widow, now so soon? Yes, they will kill you off, all the Achaean forces massed for assault, and then, bereft of you, better for me to sink beneath the earth. What other warmth, what comfort's left for me once you have met your doom? Nothing but torment. I've lost my father, mother's gone as well. Father, the brilliant Achilles laid him low when he stormed Cilicia's city filled with people. Thebe with her towering gates, he killed Aetion, and not that he stripped his gear, he'd some respect at least, for he burned his corpse in all his blazoned bronze. Then heaped a grave mound high above the ashes, and nymphs of the mountain planted elms round it, daughters of Zeus, whose shield is storm and thunder. And the 7 brothers I had within our halls, all in the same day went down to the house of death. The great godlike runner Achilles butchered them all, tending their shambling oxen, shining flocks. And mother, who ruled under the timberline of woody Plakos once, he no sooner hailed her here with his other plunder than he took a priceless ransom, set her free, and home she went to her father's royal halls, where Artemis, showering arrows, shot her down. You, Hector, you are my father now, my noble mother, a brother too, and you're my husband, young and warm and strong. Pity me, please. Take your stand on the rampart here, before you orphan your son and make your wife a widow. Draw your armies up where the wild fig tree stands, there where the city lies most open to assault, the walls lower, easily overrun. 3 times they have tried that point, hoping to storm Troy. Their best fighters, led by the great and little Ajax, famous Idomeneus, Atreus' sons, valiant Diomedes. Perhaps a skilled prophet revealed the spot, or their own fury whips them on to attack. So just on that speech of Andromache, we get the sense she's actually really experienced. She's been through war. Her father was killed by the great Achilles. Her mother was taken as a prisoner by Achilles, but also ransomed, paid straight back, freed straight away. Achilles had, and in this little sort of cameo of Achilles, Andromache gives us the idea he was a terrible fighter, right? He was a sort of a formidable fighter, but not dishonorable, because he didn't, strip her father of his armor. He arranged for a proper funeral pyre, and similarly, he ransomed back her mother. So she knows the Greek army, she knows Achilles, and she also knows strategy. She knows what the Greeks are trying to do. She knows the weakest point of the Trojan defenses. She's actually a really smart strategic thinker. As we'll see, though, Hector doesn't actually accept that from her, and he actually shuts her down. Tall Hector nodded, his helmet flashing. All this weighs on my mind too, dear woman, but I would die of shame to face the men of Troy and the Trojan women trailing their long robes if I would shrink from battle now, a coward. Nor does the spirit urge me on that way. I've learned it all too well, to stand up bravely, always to fight in the front ranks of Trojan soldiers, winning my father great glory for myself. For in my heart and soul, I also know this well. The day will come when sacred Troy must die. Priam must die, and all his people with him. Priam who hurls the strong ash spear, even so. It is less the pain of the Trojans still to come that weighs me down, not even of Hecuba herself, that's his mother, or King Priam, or the thought that my own brothers in all their numbers, or their gallant courage, may tumble in the dust, crushed by enemies. That's nothing beside your agony, when some brazen Argive hails you off in tears, wrenching your way your day of light and freedom. Then far off the land of Argos you must live, labouring at a loom, at another woman's beck and call, fetching water at some spring, Messias or Hyperia, resisting it all the way, the rough yoke of necessity at your neck. And a man may say, who sees you streaming tears, there is the wife of Hector, the bravest fighter they could field, those stallion-breaking Trojans, long ago, when the men fought for Troy. So he will say, and the fresh grief will swell your heart once more, widowed, robbed of the one man strong enough to fight off your day of slavery. No, no, let the earth come piling over my dead body before I hear your cries, I hear you dragged away. In the same breath, shining Hector reached down for his son, but the boy recoiled, cringing against his nurse's full breast, screaming out at the sight of his own father, terrified by the flashing bronze, the horsehair crest, the great ridge of the helmet, nodding, bristling terror. So it struck his eyes. And his loving father laughed. His mother laughed as well, and glorious Hector, quickly lifting the helmet from his head, set it down on the ground, fiery in the sunlight, and raising his son, he kissed him, tossed him in his arms, lifting a prayer to Zeus and all the other deathless gods. Zeus, all you immortals, grant this boy, my son, may be like me, first in glory among the Trojans, strong and brave like me, and rule all Troy in power. And one day let them say, he is a better man than his father. When he comes home from battle, bearing the bloody gear of the mortal enemy he has killed in war, a joy to his mother's heart. So yeah, this is a very famous scene, and it's kind of a family scene. You know, the little baby who's scared of the crest on his great father's helmet. But yeah, as I say, there's this sense that noble Hector, who really is the noblest of the warriors here, is somehow doomed. It's really interesting sense of fate in the Greek imagination. Any comments?
Hector is one of the few that honored his father as a natural habit. His wife does as well. His wife honors her own father properly as well. But Achilles, the others, they all have a breakdown in that kind of relationship or treating that generation. Like Hector is not willing to be king now. He's willing to be, the earnest prince, like the first son of Troy, defending it for his father, defending it for his wife, and defending it for his child, rather than saying, it's about me, why aren't I Agamemnon? Why aren't I Achilles? I'm great. Hector is great, but great for someone else, or great for others. But that get us, maybe, does that triumph? Everyone else will have to see.
Yeah, he was placed in his position by his brother from the start. You know, Hector had no choice really in all this, but he's accepted that responsibility and the responsibility of defending the city, and he has done it. You know, he's done it for nearly 10 years now. That's the other thing. In a sense, we're almost at that point where something has to give, and that's what the story will tell. Just on the poetry, how's it kind of strike people? Do you enjoy it? What's the reaction?
Yeah, I find it very readable, very easy to follow, very easy, very entrancing, very engaging. It's great, and I had to read a synopsis of the Iliad just to get my head around it all. But to read this is lovely. The way he's translated it.
Tell me if you've heard this part, Judith. I've understood things like, when we're doing things like Priam, who hurls a strong ass spear, and describing Hector in a certain way, and especially Athena, they're a part of the meter in some ways. They're like memory ticks, so you can kind of boil down the character and what everyone in that world knows them as. And when you're reciting this or you're really doing it from memory, you have these like points that you can find yourself again and continue, even if you're kind of, from day to day or from year to year as you're a heroic poet, even if it kind of bends the way you've told the story in every detail, you found these cornerstones. Again, it's really nice that they still feel like they're so poignant, even through all this time and translation.
Yeah, 100%, Sam. Yeah, so I think what you're referring to there is what's called Homeric epithets. Hector is usually kind of referred to by some epithet like horse taming, or the Trojans are in general horse tamers. That was one of the epithets. But Hector is horse taming. He's also, he's great Hector. Agamemnon is king of men. Achilles is swift-footed. Yes, you're right. Those epithets kind of locate the reciter, the poet who would have been reciting all this from memory. And yeah, and there's something that people can remember and fasten onto. Sam's right to bring up the fact that these poems were originally oral only. There's a lot of huge amount of scholarship on when exactly writing came to ancient Greece, but it's generally understood now that these poems were transmitted by oral repetition, at least in the first few hundred years. Now that's, well, obviously a huge feat of memory. The other thing is that this was learning the Homeric poems and learning to say them off by heart actually was the education of young people in Greece. I think it's in Plato's Pythagoras, where he says, I think it's Pythagoras says, that this is how we learn. When we go to school, first of all, we're sitting on the benches and we recite Homer. That's what they learnt. So it was a linguistic education. It was also a cultural education and a kind of a religious education, even though the gods are depicted as, they're depicted as belligerents in the battle and not very morally edifying. But yeah, it was a kind of a complete cultural capsule, really, of that helped enculturate the younger people. Okay, so the other sections I wanted to kind of cover tonight, the next one would be, and yeah, I mean, there's so much that we can't do, but I want to try and find a passage that gives you an idea of the great Achilles, because everyone's talked about him. And this is what happens in the early part. Once he withdraws out of the story, everyone always talks about Achilles, but we don't actually get a sense of him. So we need to actually see Achilles in action. So let's see if I can find that. Although, first of all, probably we need to look at the death of Patroclus, who was Achilles' friend. Oh, no, my screen's.
Patroclus is book 16 at about
Okay,
4:35.
Actually, let's look at book 9, because this is the embassy to Achilles. So this is when the Greeks are really hard pressed and they want Achilles back in the battle. And they come to him and they say, look, what can we do to get you back involved? And this is, this is, of course, what would become Greek rhetoric. This is the way you try and persuade someone to do something. So the Greek leaders come with all their persuasive and rhetorical weapons at their command, as it were, to try and persuade Achilles to come back to the fight. Let me see if I can find a good place for that. And sorry, along the way here, Agamemnon kind of has learned, he says, mad, blind I was, not even I would deny it. So at this point, Agamemnon is desperate, and he wants Achilles back so badly that he is going to offer this amazing ransom. He says, and this is from line 145, I think. But since I was blinded, lost in my own inhuman rage, now at last I am bent on setting things to rights. I'll give a priceless ransom paid for friendship. Here, before you all, I'll name in full the splendid gifts I offer. 7 tripods never touched by fire, 10 bars of gold, 20 burnished cauldrons, a dozen massive stallions, racers who earn me trophies with their speed. Here's no poor man who owns what they have won, not strapped for goods with all that lovely gold. What trophies those high-strung horses carried off for me. 7 women I'll give him, flawless, skilled in crafts, women of Lesbos, the ones I chose, my privilege, the day he captured the Lesbos citadel himself. They outclass the tribes of women in their beauty. These I will give, and along with them will go the one I took away at first, Briseis' daughter, and I will swear a solemn binding oath in the bargain. I never mounted her bed, never once made love with her. The natural thing for mankind, men and women joined. But now all these gifts will be handed him at once. Okay, so Agamemnon's got to such a point he's prepared to give everything back to Achilles. Even Briseis, he says he hasn't even slept with her. Interestingly, sort of kind of archaeological point here, he talks about the tripods. These are pots with 3 legs, and one of the things that the early archaeological excavations at I'm not sure about Troy exactly, but certainly in Mycenae and the Greek mainland sites from the period were these tripods. And also in the very early, when inscriptions from these times, and there were two languages from this period called Linear A and Linear B, which eventually turned out to be forms of Greek. One of the things that leapt out at the early scholars who were working on this is this word for tripod. And they were like, oh, yeah, this is the same kind of tripod that Agamemnon was happy to offer to Achilles. So that was a kind of an archaeological piece of evidence for this passage in Homer. Okay, so Ajax and Odysseus, and these are two of the greatest of the Greek fighters, made their way at once where the battle lines of breakers crash and drag. Remember that was a line we heard in the very first section. As Sam has also mentioned, sometimes these poetic lines are repeated. You know, it's kind of, it goes with the meter of the verse, and it helps the poet remember. Praying hard to the god who moves and shakes the earth, that's Poseidon, that they might bring the proud heart of Achilles round with speed and ease. Reaching the Myrmidon shelters and their ships, they found him there, delighting his heart now, plucking strong and clear on the fine lyre. Beautifully carved, its silver bridge set firm, he won from the spoils when he raised Aeetion's city. So that was Andromache's father. He took this lyre from that episode. Achilles was lifting his spirits with it now, singing the famous deeds of fighting heroes. Across from him, Patroclus sat alone in silence, waiting for Aeacus' son to finish with his song. And on they came with good Odysseus in the lead, and the envoys stood before him. Achilles, startled, sprang to his feet, the lyre still in his hands, leaving the seat where he had sat in peace. And seeing the men, Patroclus rose up too, as the famous runner called and waved them on. Welcome, look, dear friends have come our way. I must be sorely needed now, my dearest friends in all the Achaean armies, even in my anger. So Prince Achilles hailed and led them in, sat them down on settles with purple carpets, and quickly told Patroclus standing by, come, a bigger wine bowl, son of Menetius, set it here. Mix stronger wine, a cup for the hands of each guest. Here beneath my roof are the men I love the most. He paused. Patroclus obeyed his great friend, who put down a heavy chopping block in the firelight, and across it lay a sheep's chine, a fat goat's, and the long back cut of a full-grown pig marbled with lard. Automedon, that's Achilles' chariot driver, I think, held the meats while lordly Achilles carved them into quarters, cut them well into pieces, pierced them with spits, and Patroclus raked the hearth, a man like a god making the fire blaze. So they're putting on, Achilles is welcoming all the Greeks who've come to try and persuade him to come back. Patroclus, and I should have said this earlier, Patroclus is like a ancestral friend of Achilles, his dearest friend. And some traditions said that they were actually lovers. That's one version of events, but certainly they were very close friends. So the envoys have come to Achilles and he'd given them this amazing welcome, as if it was a normal situation instead of an actual war zone and a crisis. Okay, so they appeal to Achilles and they offer him the things that Agamemnon's offered him, the gifts. And Achilles responds. The famous runner Achilles rose to his challenge. Royal son of Laertes, Odysseus, great tactician, I must say what I have to say straight out. Must tell you how I feel and how all this will end. So you won't crowd around me one after another, coaxing like a murmuring clutch of doves. I hate that man like the very gates of death who says one thing but hides another in his heart. I'll say it outright. That seems best to me. Will Agamemnon win me over? Not for all the world. Nor will all the rest of Achaea's armies. No, what lasting thanks in the long run for warring with our enemies on and on no end? One and the same lot for the man who hangs back and the man who battles hard. The same honour waits for the coward and the brave. They both go down to death. The fighter who shirks, the one who works to exhaustion. And what's laid up for me? What pittance? Nothing. And after suffering hardships year in, year out, staking my life on the mortal risks of war. So it doesn't work. Basically, Achilles is having none of it. He wants no part of this because he still feels he hasn't been properly valued by the Greeks. And so the great envoys, Ajax and Odysseus, these great these great warriors have actually wasted their time. He stopped. This is Achilles. A stunning silence seized them all, struck down. Achilles' ringing denials overwhelmed them so. At last, Phoenix, the old charioteer, spoke out. He burst into tears, terrified for Achaea's fleet. Sail home? Is that what you've been turning over in your mind, my glorious one Achilles? Have you no heart at all to fight the gutting fire from the fast-trimmed ships? The spirit inside you overpowered by anger? So that's the thing, you know, Achilles' anger. It's meant that he doesn't want to be part of the Greek effort anymore, and they have no way of attracting him back into the fight, and so that's where we're left at this point. So what's the next? Yeah, then there's several books worth of more fighting without Achilles, obviously.
Just out of curiosity, what's the fighting like, you know, in the narrative? Is it very dramatic?
That's one thing I wanted to cover. So if we can, I'll just see if I can find. So interestingly, and this is something that again was confirmed by archaeological discoveries, a great fighter like Achilles or Agamemnon or Diomedes, they started off fighting from the back of a chariot, and they had a charioteer who was driving the chariot. And then when if things got to a point where they engaged in hand-to-hand combat, obviously that was they jump off the chariot. But yeah, the chariots are part of the action, and the charioteers were obviously vital as well. So it's kind of a mix between a cavalry and an infantry kind of format.
Was this before they developed the phalanx? Or...
Oh yeah, like 1,000 years before.
Sure. Yeah.
Or maybe not 1,000, but you know, hundreds of years. Yeah. So this is kind of this is like the Bronze Age, so it's semi-mythical almost. And as I say, because it preceded writing, yeah, it's always been a bit unclear as to how much was historical. But just as I say, archaeological discoveries have confirmed quite a lot, including the chariots.
Excuse me, Judy. I would infer from that then that Homer never wrote it down originally. He would have had
Correct.
to pass it on orally.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
So he would have had to teach people the whole thing
Mhm.
from his memory. So
Yeah,
he must have
that's right.
he must have had this amazing memory to construct it, memorize it, and pass it on.
But one of the interesting things that kind of came up probably in the middle of the 20th century, once these archaeological finds had been made, and there was a scholar, I think his name was Parry, American. He went to Eastern Europe and found a lot of these incredibly long poems that were committed to memory in sort of semi-literate societies. And yeah, they would be transmitted down from father to son or mother to daughter. So yeah, it's entirely possible for people to learn huge bodies of verse, partly as with those little linguistic pins, I suppose, pins in the along the way. Yeah, it's entirely possible, and in a society that's pre-literate, it happens, and presumably it was the case with all kinds of sacred literature as well.
Yeah, interestingly, in the Chinese education system, they will learn big, long chunks of history from textbooks, and they have to, from childhood, they have to recite the text by memory or from memory, and they get in trouble if they make mistakes. So, you know, it's not like you're allowed to just add a few kind of flourishes yourself. You have to repeat exactly what's said in the text.
Yeah, and this kind of the whole idea around writing or not writing kind of lends a different layer to, remember, you know, this is what Socrates talked about in the Phaedrus. He was against writing, at least in that, as Plato depicts him, because it meant that people wouldn't remember things. So yeah, I mean, And how much do we remember from stuff now? Very little, partly because we don't have to learn things. We don't have to memorize things. You know, it's a muscle that if you don't use it, you kind of lose it.
Well, and we were kind of looking at that when we did the four E's, remember? The
Yes.
extended cognition, and it's like we outsource our cognitive processes onto technologies in the world around us. And you know, sure, now we talk about digital phones and AI, but it used to be writing, you know, using a pen and paper was a way of outsourcing your mental space. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so if we want a taste of how the actual battle goes, so this is in what book's this? This is book 11, Agamemnon's Day of Glory. So basically now, okay, Achilles is still out of the picture. Agamemnon's going to show what he can do. At once, each captain shouted out commands to his driver. Rein the team by the trench. Good battle order now. While the men themselves, armed for full assault, leapt down and swarmed to the trench's edge on foot. And a long, undying roar went up in the early dawn. Well ahead of the war cars, that's the chariots, they reached the brink, closed ranks as drivers backed them yards behind. But Zeus drove a swirl of panic deep in their lines, and down from the vaulting skies released a shower raining blood. For Zeus was bent on hurling down to the house of death a rout of sturdy fighters. So the different gods are on different sides. Aphrodite is on the Trojan side, Athena is on the Greek side, Zeus kind of chops and changes. So yeah, that's also going on. Trojans, the other side.
And isn't it not only going on, but especially the daughters of Zeus and in Ares, just because he likes a bit of action, are really begging Zeus to kind of take the side that they see, you know, and advocating for them in the same way that the Trojans and the Agrievs are.
Yes, exactly. They're all kind of trying to lobby Zeus for their side. Trojans, and Hera, Zeus's wife, is very much on the side of the Greeks, and she's kind of persuasive. The other side on the plain's high ground formed around tall Hector, staunch Polydamas, Aeneas, loved by the Trojans like a god, and Antenor's sons, Polybus, Prince Agenor, and Acamas, still unwed, 3 men in their prime like gods who never die. Hector bore his round shield in the forefront, blazing out like the dog star through the clouds, or withering fire, then plunging back in the cloud rack, massed and dark. So Hector ranged on, now flaring along the front, now shouting his orders back towards the rear, all of him armed in bronze, a flash like lightning, flung by Father Zeus with his battle shield of thunder. And the men like gangs of reapers slashing down the reaping rows and coming closer, closer across the field of a warlord rich in wheat or barley, swathed by the armfuls falling thick and fast. So Achaeans and Trojans closed and slashed, lunging into each other, and neither side now had a thought of flight that would have meant disaster. No, the pressure of combat locked them head to head, lunging like wolves and strife with wild groans, exulted to see them, glaring down at the melee, strife alone of immortals hovering over fighters. As long as morning rose and the blessed day grew stronger, the weapons hurtled side to side and men kept falling. But just when the woodsman makes his morning meal, deep in a mountain forest, arm weary from chopping the big heavy trunks, and his heart has had enough, and sudden longing for tempting food overtakes the man and makes his senses whirl, just at the height of morning, the Argives smashed battalions, their courage breaking through, and they shouted ranks of cohorts on along the lines. And right in the midst sprang Agamemnon first, and killed a fighter, Bienor, veteran captain, then his aide, Oileus, lashing on their team. Down from the car he'd leapt, squaring off, charging in full fury, full face, straight, into Agamemnon's spearhead ramming sharp. The rim of the bronze helmet could not hold it. Clean through heavy metal and bone, the point burst and the brains splattered all inside the casque. He battered Oileus down despite the Trojans' rage, and the lord of fighters left them lying there, both dead, and their chests gleamed like bronze as he stripped them bare. Then on he went for Isis and Antiphus, killed and stripped the 2 sons of Priam, one a bastard, one royal blood, and both riding a single car, the bastard driving, the famous Antiphus standing poised beside him. Achilles had caught them once on the spurs of Ida, bound them with willow ropes as they watched their flocks, and set them free for ransom. But now it was Agamemnon, lord of the far-flung kingdoms, catching up with Isis. He stabbed his chest with a spear above the nipple. Antiphus he hacked with a sword across the ear, and hurled him from his chariot, rushing fast to rip the splendid armor off their bodies. He knew them both. He'd seen them once by the ships, when the swift Achilles dragged them in from Ida. Think how a lion, mauling the soft, weak young of a running deer, clamped in his massive jaws, cracks their backbones with a snap. He stormed in, invading the lair to tear their tender hearts out. And the mother doe, even if she's close by, what can she do to save her fawns? She's helpless. Terrible trembling racks her body too, and suddenly off she bounds through the glades and the thick woods, drenched in sweat, leaping clear of the big cat's pounce. So not a single Trojan could save those two from death. They fled themselves before the Argive charge. So you get a sense, it's full on. But notice also in the bit, yes, sorry, Jane.
What's Argive?
Oh,
it's
it's the adjective from Argos, which is kind of the central kingdom of Greece, which is the one that Agamemnon rules over. So it means all the Greeks. It means all
the Greeks. Yeah. All right.
And so again, you notice right in here, there's a little cameo of Achilles. Again, Achilles had in a previous encounter spared both these young men and ransomed them, but not this time. Their time's up now. Agamemnon's killed them. So yeah, I this is something that struck me again, reading this again after many years. Oh, I didn't realize there were all these little cameos about Achilles when there's these flashbacks about his previous exploits. But yeah, it's so gripping, I think.
Judith, did you study it in the Greek when you were studying it originally? Did you have to study the poetic form and the meter and all the the way that it was hung together, right? Yeah.
So
amazing.
Homeric Greek is different from later Greek, like Plato's Greek, but not as different as, say, Chaucer's English is from our English. So there's like slightly different verb forms and slightly different vowel forms, but otherwise it's as I say, it will be for people in Plato's time, it would have been a bit archaic, but not that much. Okay, so that was a taste of the actual battle. I want to find Patroclus in the battle because that's kind of key to what happens next.
Patroclus fights and dies in book 16.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, so I've just got to 15, I'll get to 16.
So it's quite a big penguin, this one. It's 700 pages, according to you.
Yeah, it's massive.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Sam, for providing it, because, yeah.
No, I was desperate to have a free copy myself, and I had to go and, I sort of self-studied it the other year. So I screened every, PDF server I could find and got this one out.
Great job. Well done. Okay, so basically, Patroclus, he knows what dire straits the Greeks are in with Achilles sitting in his tent playing his lyre, And so what is he going to do? Achilles is quite rude to him here in this first part because Patroclus is so upset. But he appeals to Achilles. And so he appeals to Achilles, okay, look, I will put on your armor and I will fight as if I was you in the battle. In a sense, he's going to impersonate Achilles in a battle.
And this would help inspire the Myrmidons, which are Achilles' men, and the Argives as well.
Yeah.
To say, well, now Achilles is fighting for us.
Yeah.
And we should fight in full spirit.
Yeah. Okay, so I just want to find the bit where he actually where he dons the armor. Maybe it's here. That was all, and Patroclus armed himself in Achilles' gleaming bronze. First he wrapped his legs with the well-made greaves, fastened behind the heels with silver ankle clasps. Next he strapped the breastplate round his chest, blazing with stars, swift Achilles' own. Then over his shoulder Patroclus slung the sword, the fine bronze blade with its silver-studded hilt, and then the shield strap and the sturdy massive shield, and over his powerful head he set the well-forged helmet, the horsehair crest atop it, bristling terror, and he took 2 rugged spears that fit his grip. And Achilles' only weapon Patroclus did not take was the great man's spear, weighted, heavy, tough. No other Achaean fighter could heft that shaft. Only Achilles had the skill to wield it well. Pelion ash it was, a gift to his father Peleus, presented by Chiron once, hewn on Pelion's crest to be the death of heroes. Chiron was a centaur who was, this half man, half horse, who was the nurse or the guardian of Achilles when he was little. So it's kind of semi-supernatural, this spear that only Achilles can wield. Now the war team. Patroclus ordered Automedon to yoke them quickly, a man he honoured next to Achilles, breaker of men, always firmest in battle, nerved to wait the call. So at his command, Automedon yoked the horses. The rapid stallions roan beauty and dapple, the team that raced the gales, magnificent team, the storm wind, filly, lightfoot, foaled for the west wind, grazing the lush green grass along the ocean's tides, and into the traces he ran the purebred, bold dancer. Achilles seized him once when he stormed Aetion's city. Again, that's Andromache's father, going back to that episode again. A mortal war horse pacing immortal horses now. Prince Achilles ranging his ranks of myrmidons. So just as Sam mentioned, the myrmidons, that's Achilles' personal army. So each of these princes in the Greek army has their own personal army. They've all brought them to the battle. And the myrmidons have been twiddling their thumbs while Achilles has been sitting in his tent. So now they're going to be brought back into the battle. Hungry as wolves that rend and bolt raw flesh, hearts filled with battle frenzy that never dies, off on the cliffs ripping apart some big antlered stag, they gorge on the kill till all their drawers droop red with blood. Then down in a pack they lope to a pooling dark spring, their lean sharp tongues lapping the water's surface. Belching bloody meat, but the fury never shaken, builds inside their chests through their glutted bellies burst. So wild the Myrmidon captains, Myrmidon field commanders, swarming round Achilles' dauntless friend in arms, and there in the midst Achilles stood like the god of war, urging his charioteers and fighters bracing shield. Okay, so Patroclus has donned the armor, the Myrmidons are ready to go. But as soon as Achilles mustered all battalions, positioned in battle order led by captains, he imposed his stern command on all his troops. Myrmidons, not one of you dare forget those threats you hurl from the fast-trimmed ships against the Trojans. All the while I rage, and I was the one you blamed, down to the last fighter. Brutal son of Peleus, your mother nursed you on Gaul, merciless Iron Man, confining your own men to the ships against their will. So home we go in those ships and cut the seas again, since now with such deadly anger strikes our captain. Denouncing me, my comrades, clustered together, always grumbling. Well, here's a tremendous work of battle, look, blazing before your eyes, just the sort you longed for all those days. So each man tense with courage, fight the Trojans down. Achilles strode back to his shelter now. So Achilles has given the Myrmidons their marching orders, and he's gone back to his tent again. Okay, so back to the battle. And so, of course, the Trojans see what they think is Achilles because it's in Achilles' armor, and the Myrmidons are back on the scene, and it has the effect that they're thinking, oh my goodness, Achilles is back. The Trojans, as soon as they saw Menetius' gallant son, himself and his loyal driver flaring brazen gear, all their courage quaked, their columns buckled, thinking swift Achilles had tossed to the winds his hard rage that held him back by the ships and chosen friendship towards the Argives now. Each Trojan soldier glancing left and right, how could he run from sudden plunging death? Patroclus was first to hurl his glinting spear right at the centre mass, the fighters milling round the stern of Protesilaus' blazing ship, and hit Parachmes, firebrand who led the Paeonians. The master riders from Amydon, from Axius' broad currents. Patroclus slashed his right shoulder and down he went, his back slamming the dust with a jolting groan. His companions panicked round him, brave Paeonians. Patroclus whipped the terror in all their hearts when he killed the chief who topped them all in battle. He rode them off the ships, he quenched the leaping fire, leaving Protesilaus' hulk half burnt but upright still, and the Trojans scattered back with high shrill cries. The Argives poured against them, back by the hollow hulls, the din of battle incessant, an Argive breakthrough. So this has had the effect. Patroclus is leading the Myrmidons as if he was Achilles. He's got the initiative again.
And I just noticed something, Judith, in that, you've been mentioning that in all these little instances of battle, these instances are flavored or colored or spiced by the memory of Achilles. like his great potency. And now finally Patroclus is like he has not managed to fully bring Achilles back into the fold, but he is honoring or like, embodying this memory of of Achilles. If it's waiting in other times, they're like, well, we miss him, or how he would handle the situation or how he's handled in the past, and now it's they don't miss him so far, so much. It's much closer at hand. One looks like a version of the
Exactly.
other.
Yeah, exactly. He does a really good job. I mean, and there's the implication that only Patroclus could do that, partly because he's the only great fighter who's still close to Achilles, because Achilles has set himself apart from all the others.
And Patroclus and Achilles' relationship reminds me of uh, our work on the symposium of those two souls split, from the beginning,
Yes.
whether it be male or female, or male or male, or female and female.
In
I think of these two in that situation.
Yeah, in Aristophanes' myth, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they're that close. But also they're very different people. I mean, that's the other thing that's important to note here. Patroclus, and I didn't sort of find a particular mention of him, but there's the way that, we talked about these epithets, the way that the different characters have these little thumbnail characterizations. Patroclus is characterized as a gentle heart. He's a brilliant fighter, but he's also a gentle heart. And it's understood that you could be both. You could be a great fighter, but also a gentle heart. And that's what Patroclus is. So that's really interesting.
They're playing the part of each other right now. Achilles is sitting back on the lyre, and and Patroclus is all forward in war. They're playing the opposite from their heart.
Yep, they've swapped over. Okay, so what happens? Oops, my screen's frozen. No, it's not working for me.
I don't know if it's how accurate this is, but I remember reading in a cult classic book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, where Robert Pirsig talks about Odysseus in particular, because he mentions Arete, and he talks about how Odysseus and the great heroes were capable of something much broader, a broader type of excellence than what we're familiar with today. Because Persig's talking about the problem of specialization, that nowadays we can be good at one thing and that's good enough, and that makes you a great person. But these great heroes, could fight, they could love, they could, shoe a horse, they could do many things excellently, like at the high end of the um, capacity for a human to do so. So in some sense, that kind of makes sense for someone like Patroclus to be not only a great fighter, but also to have that kind of great heart. And it makes you kind of think of, maybe this is not right, but that's the problem with Achilles in a sense, is his anger prevents him in a sense from really being able to be properly virtuous in that sense, holds him back.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I think that's why you find him fighting and living and dying from a corner. Why he's a certain way that bends himself, while other men return home to their hearths and their families after this, the kind of person that Achilles is tried to be in that limited way that Courtney just mentioned finds him in Hades by Odysseus' voyage.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so it had to come to this. And of course, the greatest of the Trojan fighters, Hector, meets Patroclus in Achilles' armor at this point. So you sprang at Cebriones, full fury, Patroclus, as Hector sprang down from his chariot just across, and the two went tussling over the corpse, as lions up on the mountain ridges over a fresh-killed stag, both ravenous, proud, and savage, fight out for the death. So over the driver here, and both claw mad for battle, Patroclus, son of Menetius, Hector ablaze for glory, strained to slash each other with ruthless bronze. Hector seized the corpse's head, would not let go. Patroclus clung to a foot, and other fighters clashed. Trojans, Argives, all in a grueling, maiming onset. That's actually brilliant translation, what Fagles has done there. I take my hat off. Okay, so there's a stalemate, and things go on. There's the sun bestrode the sky at high noon. Weapons hurtled, men kept falling. Then at the fourth assault, Patroclus, like something superhuman, then Patroclus, the end of life, came blazing up before you. Yes, the Lord Apollo met you there in the heart of battle, the god, the terror. Patroclus never saw him coming, moving across the deadly route, shrouded in thick mist, and on he came against him, and looming up behind him now, slammed his broad shoulders and back with the god's flat hand, and his eyes spun as Apollo knocked the helmet off his head, and under his horse's hoofs it tumbled, clattering on with its four forged horns and its hollow blank eyes, and its plumes were all smeared in the bloody dust. Forbidden before this to defile its crest in dust, it guarded the head and handsome brow of a god, a man like a god, Achilles. But now the father gave it over to Hector to guard his head in war, since Hector's death was closing in on him quickly. Patroclus, though, the spear in his grip was shattered, the whole of its rugged, bronze-shod, shadow-casting length, and his shield with straps and tassels dropped from his shoulders, flung down on the ground, and Lord Apollo, the son of Zeus, wrenched his breastplate off. Disaster seized him. His fine legs buckling, he stood there senseless, and now, right at his back, close up, a Dardan fighter speared him, squarely between the shoulder blades with a sharp lance. Panthea's son, Euphorbus, the best of his own age at spears and a horseman's skill and speed of foot. And even in this, his first attack in chariots, just learning the arts of war, he brought down 20 drivers off their cars. He was the first to launch a spear against you, Patroclus, O my rider, but he did not bring you down. Yanking out his ashen shaft from your body, back he dashed and lost himself in the crowd. The man would not stand up to Patroclus here in mortal combat, stripped, defenseless as he was. Patroclus was stunned by the spear, and the god's crushing blow was weaving back to his own thronging comrades, trying to escape death. Hector waiting, watching the great-hearted Patroclus trying to stagger free, seeing him wounded there with a sharp bronze, came rushing into him right across the lines and rammed his spear shaft home, stabbing deep in the bowels, and the brazen point went jutting out straight out through a Patroclus' back. Down he crashed. Horror gripped the Achaean armies, as when some lion overpowers a tireless wild boar up on a mountain summit, battling in all their fury over a little spring of water. Both beasts craving to slake their thirst, but the lion beats him down with sheer brute force as the boar fights for death. So now, with a close thrust, Hector, the son of Priam, tore the life from the fighting son of Menetius, from Patroclus, who had killed so many when in war. So Patroclus has been killed by Hector, of course, and with Apollo helping, because otherwise that wouldn't have happened. He needed Apollo's help. Okay, so what's going to happen now?
And I quickly realized Patroclus is shown to not be Achilles. His helmet is cast off by Apollo,
Exactly.
and his spear, which if it were Achilles' spear, would be given, by great nurses and great powers, was shattered. So he's everything of Achilles on the battlefield except Achilles himself.
Exactly. Okay, so then there's a realization that it wasn't Achilles that had been defeated here. It was Patroclus, but now here's Menelaus. So one of the things about the Iliad that must have been part of why it was such a central text was every different part of Greece is represented. Everyone gets to represent. Every hero has his hour, and this is Menelaus, the finest hour, the king of Sparta, the brother of Agamemnon, the man who was essentially wronged in the very first place by Paris stealing his wife. Menelaus is also a great fighter, and here in the battle for the body of Patroclus, he comes to the fore. But I don't think we've got a sense of the battle here. We need to kind of move the story along a bit. What next? So once once Patroclus has been killed, what then for Achilles?
Should we just go to book 19, the champion arms for battle? Oh
Yes,
no,
let's
no,
go
the
there.
shield. The shield is more important, actually.
Well,
I love the
yes.
shield.
There's so many highlights, right? I don't think we can go into the shield of Achilles. So basically,
No, it's true.
um, basically, in order for Achilles to, so this, well, actually, let's read this bit. So this is at the start of this one, and the thing is, Achilles must have had a sense. What if Achilles must have realized that there was a chance that Patroclus would be killed, but he sent his friend off anyway. So that's part of what's going on here. As such fears went churning through his mind, the warlord Nestor's son drew near him now, streaming warm tears to give the dreaded message. Ah, son of royal Peleus, what you must hear from me. What painful news. Would to God it never happened. Patroclus has fallen. They're fighting over his corpse. He's stripped naked. Hector with a flashing helmet. Hector has your arms. So the captain reported. A black cloud of grief came shrouding over Achilles. Both hands clawing the ground for soot and filth, he poured it over his head, fouled his handsome face, and black ashes settled onto his fresh, clean war shirt. So then we have the grief of Achilles. So not only is Achilles immoderate in his anger, he is immoderate in his grief. And he lets his grief for Patroclus and, a sense of guilt, obviously, because he sent Patroclus out in his armor to be him, essentially, in the battle. Then we have this immoderate grief, and Achilles goes into this period of misery and grieving. And ultimately, the only person who can get him out of this is his mother, the goddess or the sea nymph Thetis, who's the daughter of Zeus. And she persuades him that he really needs to pull himself together. and interestingly, this kind of episode with Achilles having this immoderate grief kind of becomes this cultural touchstone. And you see it in kind of later contexts, such as, for example, Seneca talking to Marcia about her dead son. This idea of the fact that there's actually an appropriate amount of grieving and there's an inappropriate amount of grieving, and Achilles went to the inappropriate end of it. That became a kind of a cultural benchmark from then on. And the way that Thetis, gets him back into the battle is by organizing to the great god of the forge, the great metalworking god Hephaestus. She gets Hephaestus to make a new set of armor, obviously, since the previous set has been lost with Patroclus. And so, yeah, there's a whole lot of negotiation about that. I will just maybe do a tiny bit on the Shield of Achilles, if we can find the, here we go. And again, because this is a very important episode, it's called ekphrasis, which means talking about something, or a kind of a whole explanation. And this description of what's on Achilles' new shield is a very famous passage. And first Hephaestus makes a great and massive shield, blazoning well-wrought emblems all across its surface, raising a rim around it, glittering triple ply with a silver shield strap running from edge to edge, and 5 layers of metal to build the shield itself. And across its vast expanse, with all his craft and cunning, the god creates a world of gorgeous, immortal work. There he made the earth, and there the sky and the sea, and the inexhaustible blazing sun and the moon rounding full, and there the constellations, all that crown the heavens, the Pleiades and the Hyades, Orion in all his power too, and the great bear that mankind also calls the wagon. She wheels on her access, always fixed, watching the hunter, and she alone is denied a plunge in the ocean's bars. And he forged on the shield 2 noble cities filled with mortal men, with weddings and wedding feasts in one, and under glowing torches they brought forth the brides from the women's chambers, marching through the streets with choir on choir, the wedding song rose high, and the young men came dancing, whirling round in rings, and among them flutes and harps kept up their stirring call. Women rushed to the doors, and each stood moved with wonder. and the people massed, streaming into the marketplace where a quarrel had broken out, and two men struggled over the blood price for a kinsman just murdered. One declaimed in public, vowing payment in full. The other spurned him. He would not take a thing. So both men pressed for a judge to cut the knot. The crowd cheered on both. They both took sides. And so you're thinking, how can these things be depicted on a shield in bronze? But the genius of this is it's kind of a microcosm of the world of peace. You know, this is a little microcosm of the peaceful world back in Greece, the homelands, whereas in fact we're in this chaotic, bloody world of war. And so that's the genius of this amazing shield that Hephaestus makes. It's a vision of peace in the midst of war.
Even the squabbling over the blood price, but looking for a knot and a rule is like, why couldn't Agamemnon and Achilles find such judge?
That's true. Exactly.
And some structure around them to guard them in this.
Exactly. And then there's an army depicted, a divided army. Of course, that's what the Greeks are. They're a divided army. And so that's what's on the shield. Okay, there's a lot more of it. But as I say, it's extremely famous. Okay, the champion arms for battle. Okay. So Thetis is still persuading Achilles to get back into the fray. Let's see if we can find where Achilles okay, there's some discussion with Agamemnon. And Odysseus is trying to calm the waters, keep everyone on side. This is a kind of an interesting cameo. So Briseis, so she's the other young girl who in the very beginning was, she and Chryseis, the one that was the daughter of the priest, Briseis had been very attached to Patroclus. And this is partly why we know that Patroclus was such a good person, is what Briseis says about him. When she saw Patroclus lying torn by the bronze, she flung herself on his body, gave a piercing cry, and with both hands clawing deep at her breasts, her soft throat and lovely face, she sobbed, a woman like a goddess in her grief. Patroclus, dearest joy of my heart, my harrowed, broken heart. I left you alive the day I left these shelters. Now I come back to find you fallen, captain of armies. So grief gives way to grief, my life one endless sorrow. But you, Patroclus, you will not let me weep, not when the swift Achilles cut my husband down, not when he plundered the lordly mighty city, not even weep. No, again and again you vowed you'd make me godlike Achilles' lawful wedded wife. You're always kind. Okay, so. All right, so Achilles arms himself. And this is a dramatic moment. And it's a kind of an echo of what we just read with Patroclus arming himself in the previous set of Achilles' armor. Lots of the same phrasing appears. So the war team, that's Alchemist and Automedon, they get the chariots ready. With the horses again, it's a kind of a repeat. And then once Achilles, oh yeah, and next book is 20, sorry, we're up to 20. The Olympian gods in arms, that's a kind of a bit of a diversion as well, because the gods are now having an argument about what's going on. But they do kind of get involved. So God went up against God, but blazing Achilles strained to engage Prince Hector, plunge in battle with him above and beyond all others. Achilles yearning now to glut with Hector's blood, his, no other. Ares, who hacks at men behind his warhide shield. But Aeneas it was, whom Phoebus, that's Apollo, urger of armies, filled with power now and drove against Achilles. Phoebus, masking his voice like Priam's son, like Haon. Like him to the life, the son of Zeus called out. Captain of Trojan councils, where have they gone? Those threats you made in your cups before the kings, boasting you'd face Achilles man to man in battle. The reason why Aeneas is so important in the story, he's another of Priam's sons. But he's particularly important because the Romans regarded Aeneas as their ancestor. And when we get to Virgil's epic, the Aeneid, it's the story of Aeneas and how he left Troy. So that's kind of why Aeneas is so important for later literature. Okay, so there's arguing between the gods. And there's also a lot of sort of talking between the warriors. Battle between Aeneas and Achilles. This is a passage which shows us what Achilles is like in battle. Vaunting over the dark that swept his quarry's eyes, and the running rims of Argive war cars cut him to shreds at the onset's breaking edge. And next, Achilles lunged at Demoleon, son of Antenor, a tough defensive fighter. He stabbed his temple and cleft his helmet's cheekpiece. None of the bronze plate could hold it, boring through the metal and skull, the bronze spear point pounded. Demoleon's brains splattered all inside his casque, the Trojan beaten down in his fury. Hippodamus next. He leapt from his chariot, fleeing before Achilles. Achilles' spear shaft rammed him through the back, and he gasped his life away, bellowing like some bull that chokes and grunts when the young boys drag him round. So that Achilles is basically in this kind of frenzy of aggression, this what later with the Vikings be called berserker. You know, he is just on a mission. He wants to kill Hector, but in the meantime, he will just kill any Trojan that's standing in his way. And we get a sense of what a terrifying fighter he is. So in the meantime, there's this episode where Achilles fights the river, because the rivers are, of course, divine. And one of them is on the side of the Trojans. And so Achilles has this battle against the river.
Does he throw a plastic bag in it?
The river's something a lot like his mother, really, isn't it?
Yep, yeah, true. I mean, she's a water spirit. Okay, let's see if we can get to the death of Hector. Okay, so King Priam was first to see him coming. That's Achilles, as we say, on a mission. Surging over the plain, blazing like the star that rears at harvest, flaming up in its brilliance, far outshining the countless stars in the night sky. The star they call Orion's dog, brightest of all, but a fatal sign emblazoned on the heavens. It brings such killing fever down on wretched men. So Priam has seen Achilles coming from, because Priam's up on the walls, he's seen Achilles come from the plain. And then he appeals to Hector because you know he's going to be killed by Achilles. And of course, there's a kind of dispute in the background between Athena and Zeus. So Achilles is basically stalking Hector. Okay, so, and Athena kind of deceives Hector in this moment, because that's one thing, the things that the gods do in the battle, they kind of assume the form of fighters and deceive the human fighters, and that leads to certain outcomes. So Athena is playing a part here. There's a sort of a challenge between Achilles and Hector. With that shaft poise, this is Achilles, he hurled and his spear's long shadow flew, but seeing it coming, glorious Hector ducked away, crouching down, watching the bronze tip fly past and stab the earth. But Athena snatched it up and passed it back to Achilles, and Hector, the gallant captain, never saw her. He sounded out a challenge to Peleus' princely son. You missed, look, the great godlike Achilles. So you knew nothing at all from Zeus about my death, and yet how sure you were. All bluff, cunning with words, that's all you are, trying to make me fear you, lose my nerve, forget my fighting strength. Well, you never plant your lance in my back, as I flee you in fear. Plunge it through my chest as I come charging in, if a god gives you the chance. But now it's for you to dodge my brazen spear. I wish you'd buried in your body to the hilt. How much lighter the war would be for Trojans then, if you, their greatest scourge, were dead and gone? Shaft poised, he hurled, and his spear's long shadow flew, and it struck Achilles' shield, a dead center hit. But off and away it glanced, and Hector seized his hurtling spear, his whole arm's power poured in a wasted shot. He stood there cast down. He had no spear in reserve. So Hector shouted out to Deiphobus. Bearing his white shield with a ringing shout, he called for a heavy lance, but the man was nowhere near him, vanished. Yes, and Hector knew the truth in his heart, and the fighter cried aloud, my time has come. At last the gods have called me down to death. I thought he was at my side, the hero Deiphobus, but he's safe inside the walls. Athena's tricked me blind. And now death, grim death, is looming up beside me, no longer far away. No way to escape it now. This was their pleasure after all, sealed long ago. Zeus and the son of Zeus, the distant deadly archer. Though often before now they rushed to my defense. So now I meet my doom. Well, let me die, but now not without struggle, not without glory, no, in some great clash of arms that even men to come will hear of down the years. Okay, so finally, bright as that star amid the stars in the night sky, star of the evening, brightest star that rides the heavens, so fire flared from the sharp point of the spear Achilles brandished high in his right hand, bent on Hector's death, scanning his splendid body where to pierce at best. The rest of his flesh seemed all encased in armor, burnished, brazen, Achilles' armor that Hector had stripped from strong Patroclus when he killed him. True, but one spot lay exposed, where collarbones lift the neckbone off the shoulders, the open throat, where the end of life comes quickest. There, as Hector charged in fury, brilliant Achilles drove his spear, and the point went stabbing clean through the tender neck. But the heavy bronze weapon failed to slash the windpipe. Hector could still gasp out some words, some last reply. He crashed in the dust. Godlike Achilles gloried over him. Hector, surely you thought when you stripped Patroclus' armor that you would be safe, never a fear of me, far from the fighting as I was, you fool. Left behind there, down by the big ships, his great avenger waited, a greater man by far. That man was I, and I smashed your strength. And you, the dogs and birds will maul you, shame your corpse, while Achaeans burn my dear friend in glory. Okay, so Hector begs that Achilles will give his body back to the Trojan royal family, but Achilles refuses. Death cut him short. The end closed in around him. Flying free of his limbs, his soul went winging down to the house of death, wailing his fate, leaving his manhood far behind, his young and supple strength. But brilliant Achilles taunted Hector's body, dead as he was. Die, die. For my own death, I'll meet it freely, whenever Zeus and the other deathless gods would like to bring it on. With that, he wrenched his bronze spear from the corpse, laid it aside, and ripped the bloody armor off the back. And the other sons of Achaea, running up around him, crowded closer, all of them gazing wonderstruck at the build and marvelous lithe beauty of Hector. And not a man came forward who did not stab his body, glancing towards a comrade, laughing. Oh, look here, how much softer he is to handle now, this Hector, than when he gutted our ships with roaring fire. And so what happened to the Achilles who in times gone by, as we saw with all the little cameos and the little flashbacks and the little thumbnails, who was an honorable fighter and who gave honorable burial to his defeated enemies, that Achilles is apparently no more, because he's taunting Hector. All the Greeks are coming to stab the body, and as we see, he does something really barbarous. He
Yet
sorry, go
Hector
on, sir.
still
Yeah.
yet Hector still remembers all those levels of hospitality, even in death, right up to his last words.
Yes, that's true. Piercing the tendons, ankle to heel behind both feet, he knotted straps of rawhide through them both, lashed them to his chariot, left the head to drag, and mounting the car, hoisting the famous arms aboard, he whipped his team to a run, and breakneck on they flew, holding nothing back. And a thick cloud of dust rose up from the man they dragged, his dark hair swirling around that head so handsome once, all tumbled low in the dust, since Zeus had given him over to his enemies now, to be defiled in the land of his own fathers. So his whole head was dragged down in the dust, and now his mother began to tear her hair. She flung her shining veil to the ground and raised a high, shattering scream, looking down at her son. Pitifully, his loving father groaned, and round the city his people cried with grief, and wailing seized the city. For all the world, as if Troy were torched and smouldering down from the looming brows of the citadel to her roots. So the whole city sees the great hero dragged shamefully at the back of Achilles' chariot round the walls, which again is not the way an honorable enemy is to be treated. And so it's as if with the death of Patroclus, something is snapped within Achilles. It's a moral injury. You know, he's lost his moral compass. I mean, we might think that he was a bit dodgy with his moral compass in the first place, but you know, as the thumbnails told us, he was always considered an honorable warrior. Now he's not. Now he's done something that's unforgivable, really, in the kind of the scheme of the morals of war. Any comments or thoughts before we hopefully get to the final section, which is where Priam appeals to Achilles for Hector's body back?
He already doesn't care about what he owes or should be with Agamemnon. You know, he's already over that connection. And now this sort of deep-hearted connection that they really have, he doesn't seem to care about anything of the Greek world anymore, or to be a part of it.
Exactly. Yeah, he doesn't. So in book 23, Achilles kind of indulges his grief to the extent that he organizes this huge funeral games for Patroclus, and there's a whole interesting subplot around there and the different competitions that take place as part of the funeral games.
Could I just ask a question then,
Yeah.
since we had a pause? I noticed you used the word like moral injury in that, and I was thinking, because you've often mentioned that book about Vietnam, Achilles.
Yeah.
Can't remember what it's called, but obviously, that book, the one about Vietnam, how does it link to this? Like, I feel like you're sort of thinking of it when you're talking about Achilles.
Yeah, that's right. So in the book Achilles in Vietnam by Jonathan Shea, he explains that something like this, something like the death of a close comrade, can have this effect that it will kind of shift somebody's moral bearings, really, because it would seem like the natural order or the proper order has been interrupted or disrupted. And it needn't be, I mean, it can be the death of a comrade, as in Achilles' case, but it could be where, for example, a poor decision from the hierarchy of a command structure has gone wrong with poor results, or where someone's been has got orders to do something that's against their own code of conduct. So all of these things can bring about what's a kind of a rupture in the moral compass of somebody. And yeah, that's kind of the idea of the book, in part, is that for Achilles, it was the death of Patroclus, which of course Achilles was conscious of having contributed to by the fact that if it hadn't been for him sitting in his tent and refusing to take part and sending Patroclus out in his own armor, it wouldn't have happened. So there's a sense of responsibility, a sense of a need to atone. And yeah, it's as if all the rules of warfare have now evaporated for Achilles.
Which at the beginning he was fighting Agamemnon about.
Exactly.
Why aren't we following these rules?
Exactly.
And you know, interestingly, I think I don't know much about it, but this idea of moral injury and narcissistic injury and things like that, when it comes to warfare, there's this idea, and I think we saw that with the Michael Evans one, The Captains of the Soul, that you need a kind of moral compass as a kind of potential, you know, this is kind of the thinking as a kind of defense against things like post-traumatic stress disorder, this kind of modern um, way of looking at the consequences of certain kinds of injury, moral injury, and things like that. I know you're slightly talking about something different, but I think it's kind of interesting how it's shifted now to that kind of psychological consequence rather than say virtue or something like that.
Yeah, no, there's definitely yeah, I think it was touched on in the Evans article. So what the funeral games of Patroclus have kind of afforded a bit of a pause. And that's what funerals do, right? You know, they afford a pause for the people who are mourning. They afford something to occupy the time, something a focus of effort. But now what? But still, Achilles is ruthless about Hector, Hector's body. So he drags him 3 times around. He dragged him around the city, and now he's dragging him around Patroclus's tomb. But we see that Apollo pitied Hector, dead man though he was, and warded all corruption off from Hector's corpse and wrapped him around Hector fought. The great god wrapped the golden shield of storm so his skin would never rip as Achilles dragged him on. So the gods have kind of intervened. Achilles has broken all the rules. The gods have to intervene. Okay, so again, there's an argument between the gods about it. Okay, so Priam, King Priam, old King Priam, the king of Troy, has decided he is going to make a personal appeal to Achilles for his son's body back. And he's going to take some valuable gifts. Again, there's tripods, cauldrons, magnificent presents. And again, King Priam is in his old age. He hasn't got anything to lose anymore. His city is going to be destroyed. He knows that. All he wants now is his son's body back. So yeah, it's quite a lot of kind of preamble here. With some of Achilles' attendants. Okay, so what are they going to do? They've got the help of the gods. Priam swung down to earth from the battle car, and leaving Idaeus there to rein in mules and team, the old king went straight up to the lodge where Achilles, dear to Zeus, would always sit. Priam found the warrior there inside, many captains sitting some way off. The 2 veteran Automedon and the fine fighter Alcimus were busy serving him. He had just finished dinner, eating, drinking, and the table still stood near. The majestic king of Troy slipped past the rest, and kneeling down beside Achilles, clasped his knees and kissed his hands, those terrible man-killing hands that had slaughtered Priam's many sons in battle. Awesome as when the grip of madness seizes one who murders a man in his own fatherland and flees abroad to foreign shores to a wealthy noble host, and a sense of marvel runs through all who see him. So Achilles marveled, beholding majestic Priam. His men marveled too, trading startled glances. But Priam prayed his heart out to Achilles. Remember your own father, great god like Achilles, as old as I am, past the threshold of deadly old age. No doubt the countrymen around him plague him now, with no one there to defend him, beat away disaster. No one, but at least he hears you're still alive, and his old heart rejoices, hopes rising day by day to see his beloved son come sailing home from Troy. But I, dear God, my life so cursed by fate, I fathered hero sons in the wide realm of Troy, and now not a single one is left, I tell you. 50 sons I had when the sons of Achaea came, 19 born to me from a single mother's womb, and the rest by other women in the palace. Many, most of them violent Ares, cut the knees from under. But one was left me to guard my walls, my people, the one you killed the other day, defending his fatherland, my Hector. It's all for him I've come to the ships now, to win him back from you. I bring a priceless ransom. Revere the gods, Achilles. Pity me in my own right. Remember your own father. I deserve more pity. I've endured what no man on earth has ever done before. I put to my lips the hands of the man who killed my son. And so Achilles is moved. He thinks of his own father. But he doesn't quite get what he wants, Priam. He says, I accept the ransom I bring you, a king's ransom. Enjoy it, all of it. Return to your own native land, safe and sound, since now you've spared my life. A dark glance and the headstrong runner answered, no more, old man. Don't tempt my wrath, not now. My mind's made up to give you back your son. A messenger brought me word from Zeus, my mother, Thetis, who bore me, the old man of the sea's daughter. And what's more, I can see through you, Priam. No hiding the fact from me. One of the gods has led you down to Achaea's fast ships. No man alive, not even a rugged young fighter, would dare to venture into our camp. Never. How could he slip past the sentries unchallenged, or shoot back the bolt of my gates with so much ease? So don't anger me now. Don't stir my raging heart still more. Or under my own roof, I may not spare your life, old man. Suppliant that you are, may break the laws of Zeus. The old man was terrified. He obeyed the order. But Achilles bounded out of doors like a lion. Isn't that an echo of the very first scene where Agamemnon sent away the priest and said, don't come back, old man? Well, here Achilles is sending away King Priam, but he does release the body of Hector for a proper burial, or proper burial and funeral. So that's really all, we're coming to the end of our time, and thank you for listening to me talking so much and reading the amazing poem. I hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you've got something out of it.
I
Amazing.
think you presented it really well. I really enjoyed that. Thank you, Judith.
Oh, thank you.
Do you think that in the retelling and maybe finally when it was actually laid to writing, do you think things over time gather or embellishment or or do you think it was more truly maintained from its original form because of the accuracy with which people memorized and learnt these things?
I think it probably certain things would have got embellished. Like, for instance, the Shield of Achilles. Obviously, that was kind of a set piece that got, I would say, embellished over time. What we didn't do was book 2. Now, book 2 consists mainly of, it's called the ship list, and basically it's a list of all the different city-states in Greece and the number of ships they sent and the warriors they sent. So something like that would be how every different city-state in Greece would say, oh yeah, this is our bit, this is where we come in. So things like that would have got added, I would say, over time and embellished. But I think that the key elements of the plot must have been there pretty well from the start.
And it's also fascinating to realise that, he actually wrote the Odyssey as well. Is the Odyssey as long as the Iliad or longer?
Yeah. I mean, and that brings us, I guess, to our next session. I was going to say, Sam, did you want to introduce us to the Odyssey?
I do love the Odyssey. I do. So Judith was saying that this is a 10-year, this war has taken about 10 years. It's a 10-year uphill battle to Troy, from the Greek islands. But many of the men, that were famous during this war might have found their way home or found their way to their own ends. Like in that Odysseus seems to be very lost, like on his way home. And for what requires 10 years to do, this sort of war effort or this like mode of action in the world seems to have sharpened the swords, for 10 long years in this way, for the battle for Troy. It seems to take another 10 years to return. Another 10 years for Odysseus. Maybe the one of the most honed of swords in this entire battle, sharp and discerning that you can balance all the others on. It takes 10 long years for that kind of sword to find a sheath, to belong home.
It's a bit like Achilles, right? Because Achilles kind of undoing is his kind of his anger, but his ability to kind of offend the gods. And I think you see the same problem with Odysseus. He's a bit too cunning for his own good, and he can't help but offend the gods because he turns his cunning even on them sometimes, doesn't he?
And Odysseus, I think, needs to learn the same type of hospitality that Achilles and the others are missing out on. That for them to go home, they need to come begging, in the same way, come begging as though they are ragged and a stranger, but deserving of the hospitality that if that was Zeus, come begging at your door. Until he's so proud or just so like, no, I'm Odysseus, he's not maybe the great hero of the Trojan War is not yeah. There's an interesting thing between Odysseus and Laertes, his father, I think, in terms of what version of them in old age, much more like Priam, belong, belong in their like home fires, belong at their hearths.
Well, I'd be happy
That
to look to do the Odyssey, Sam. I think that'd be fabulous.
Yeah, it'd be great. I look forward to that. It's awesome.
you,
So,
you were saying, Judith, that the opening of this started with, the priest begging, and it seems like even from the walls, Priam was, sort of begging or calling for better treatment for a son, or at least a dignified death. And
Yeah,
then,
exactly. Yeah.
I don't know, begged to Achilles as
Yeah.
the god.
It's come full circle, hasn't it? That yeah, that Priam has put himself in the power essentially of the man-slaying hands of Achilles. But I think one of the things that the Iliad gets us to think about in the end is what does Achilles accomplish, really? I mean, the Iliad actually ends before the actual fall of Troy. That actually comes in a kind of a later series of myths, which is a sort of a part of a cycle, but the actual Iliad doesn't actually have the destruction of Troy in it.
So who wrote the histories of that, Judith? The rest of it. Who are some of the historians or writers that wrote the rest of the war?
Well, I think the actual destruction of Troy is in some relatively less well known epic, which escapes me for the moment, but it kind of also got celebrated, as I said earlier, by the Roman poet Virgil in the Aeneid. So he starts with the destruction of Troy. But yeah, so there were different versions, I guess, current at different times. So yeah, so
Judith, do you want to read the last sentence of the
oh,
Iliad? So
okay,
just
yeah,
just
let's
how
do
this
that.
one ends, so
Yeah,
it doesn't end with the fall of Troy.
No, it doesn't. Let me go.
or as much of it as
Yeah,
you
okay. So
find.
I'll just read this last paragraph. At last, when young Dawn with her rose-red fingers shone once more, the people massed around illustrious Hector's pyre. And once they gathered, crowding the meeting grounds, they first put out the fires with glistening wine, wherever the flames still burned in all their fury. Then they collected the white bones of Hector, all his brothers, his friends in arms mourning, and warm tears came streaming down their cheeks. They placed the bones they found in a golden chest, shrouding them round and round in soft purple cloths. They quickly lowered the chest in a deep hollow grave, and over it piled a cope of huge stones closely set, then hastily heaped a barrow, posted lookouts all around, for fear the Achaean combat troops would launch their attack before the time agreed. And once they'd heaped the mound, they turned back home to Troy, and gathering once again, they shared a splendid funeral feast in Hector's honor, held in the house of Priam, king by will of Zeus. And so the Trojans buried Hector, breaker of horses.
May I just ask why Priam said to Achilles, all my sons are dead, and yet here he's saying, there they collected the white bones of Hector, all his brothers, his friends at arms mourning. I thought all his brothers were dead.
Yeah, I mean, heck, Priam may have exaggerated. So certainly, I mean, if you've gone through and sort of sort of made notes of all the different heroes who've died, some of them would have been Hector's brothers. So yeah, so there's a certain amount of poetic license, I think, there.
And he did have 50. So
He did have 50. That's right. But yeah, so interesting.
And that's not counting the daughters.
That's not counting the daughters. That's right. That epithet, breaker of horses, is the very last expression in the poem. That's his epithet. That's what he was known for.
All right. Well, that was wonderful, and it was wonderful to see you all again. And I think that would be wonderful to do the Odyssey.
Yeah,
so that'll be great. So it sounds like we've got that sorted out. 2 weeks.
Lovely.
In 2 weeks.
Sam, are you happy to lead that one?
Yes, I can leave that one.
Wonderful.
All right.
I don't know if I have a PDF. I think I'm using the digital version I have at the moment. I think I've bought, like a Google doc, a Google book.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, that would be great.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful to see you all, and I guess we'll wrap this one up. Thank you again, and good luck. Have a great week.
If you want to put up maybe, even if, look, we don't expect you to put the whole book up, but maybe a few excerpts or something, Sam, or some page numbers or section suggestions, maybe just as a focus as well, would be good. Maybe it's up to you.
Yeah,
it's up to you.
No, that'd be good. I delivered a little version the other year, at least like as a tour through it, but didn't have time to break it down. So we'll use a similar structure because I think that painted a nice thread from the beginning to the end. But then we can rely on the book to flesh each of those pearls out.
Excellent. All right, guys.
Thank
I'm hanging
you.
up. See you later, all.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.